I'm Greg Heilman, and today I'm joined by Alan Harrison, whose book, Scene Change, Why Today's Nonprofit Arts Organizations Have to Stop Producing Art and Start Producing Impact, releases tomorrow. Alan is I want to get this right, local stage and film actor, nonprofit executive, cabaret piano player, composer, and the list goes on and on. We will post all of Alan's qualifications and experience in the show notes, but I also do want to mention two-time Jeopardy champion.
That's right, 2018.
Excellent. That is something I've always thought whether I could do it. I don't think that's got to be a lot of. That should be a conversation for another time. We'll probably go on for days. So, welcome to the show, Alan. It's great to have you here.
Nice to be here. Thank you.
So, the book is definitely timely. Coming out of COVID, we see gradually people are starting to come back to theaters, but subscriptions are down,
way down
across the board. There's competition, not just with the pre-COVID type of competition among theater groups and among other outdoor activities, but now since COVID, there's streaming and other in-home entertainment, and it's trying to get people off the couch. So the challenge that you present in your book is what organizations can do not just to meet this competition and survive, but to ultimately be successful and thrive. So how long have you been thinking about this, and what convinced you? Was it one thing that convinced you to make it into a book, or was it just that you compiled ideas over time and thought this is a book?
Well, I worked in the nonprofit arts organization business for about 30 years. Marketing, a little bit of development, and I ran a couple of companies during that time. The Alabama Shakespeare Festival, and here in Seattle, I ran ArtsWest for about 7 years. And it was through all of that, we were constantly, no matter the size of the organization, whether it was my early days at Lincoln Center Theater, which informs a lot of the way I look at things, and then all the way to ArtsWest, where we were named Best Nonprofit Place to Work and Theater of the Year, and still struggled to make a living. And part of that has to do with the idea that the arts are not valued by the general public as something that is essential, even though the arts themselves are essential. So that's a different take than most people look at it. I divide the universe, that universe, into three, and I do this in the book. It's art, artists, and arts organizations. So art is essential because it exists. No matter what, it's like air, it's like water. It's in a very literal sense, not very literal, the literal sense, it is essential.
Well, from the beginning, cavemen have been producing art. I mean, all the way back.
We don't even have to produce art. Anything that's been designed is art. In fact, anything that hasn't been designed is art. You could, I remember a comedian saying that they were so poor that on July 4th, they didn't go to the fireworks. They just closed their eyes and did this. That's art.
Good point, yeah.
Okay? So art is everywhere. Is everywhere. Artists are magical. Artists are amazing. Artists take disparate ideas or things or notions or a combination of thereof and create something special out of all of that. They amalgamate it into art, which then becomes essential. So it's been known for years that cities with lots of artists in them are the same cities that are succeeding on a financial level. And that was Richard Florida's research in the rise of the creative class. And some of it was debunked, but still, most of it still stands, which is that the 10 most successful financial regions in the country, not just cities, it's regions, are also the 10 highest populated artist regions.
Yeah.
So artists raise the value of your region. You look at Seattle and you look at Little Rock, Arkansas. Little Rock, Arkansas has got a wonderful, performance hall paid for by the Waltons and all of that. But it's also kind of a failing city because artists don't live there.
Yeah.
So, but artists live in Seattle, and artists live in San Francisco, and Austin, and San Jose, and Chicago, and New York, and Los Angeles, and the like. So Atlanta. So those cities have become more successful. So artists, while they're not, I guess, essential to the process, make the process more valuable, make art more valuable. and to everyone, not just to themselves, but to everyone. Then you have arts organizations. So arts organizations are neither art nor artists. They are companies that present art, or produce, which really means present art. They act as a collaborator, they act as the launching pad for the rocket, not the rocket itself. So I know everybody on all of those days in the 60s when they turned on their TV and they heard that there was a launch going on, they were really focused on the launching pad, right? They weren't focused on the rocket going into space at all. But boy, that launching pad was something else. So they don't deserve funding per se, unless they're doing something for the community. And that's where the nonprofit status comes in. A commercial arts organization, Broadway or the like, movies, they don't have to do any of that. In fact, that's what you're paying for. You're paying for the right to do what you want, need, think will sell. Your boss is your shareholder, essentially. That's a different story. That's a separate conversation from the 133,000 nonprofit arts organizations that exist in America, 49,000 of which are theaters. It's by far the largest group. But in a nonprofit status, you have to read Section 501c3 of the IRS code. One of the funniest / saddest things that I've ever come across is that every time I speak, and I speak to a lot of organizations and to conferences and whatnot, one of the first questions I ask the crowd is, how many of you have ever read Section 501c3 of the IRS code? 10% tops.
Yeah,
Tops.
I would think it'd be lower than that. I mean, usually an organization's going to have one person fill out the paperwork, and then once the paperwork's filled out, you're the 501c3, and then that's just what you tell everybody.
Right. 20 years down the road, you're showing a letter that says, see, I'm a 501c3, but you don't know what that means.
Yeah, exactly.
So 501c3, it's only like 4 or 5 sentences. It's not long. It's very short. There is really no excuse for anybody, for you guys, no excuse for anybody who's not running a nonprofit, or for anyone who's running a nonprofit not to have read Section 501c3. And that's everybody needs to read it. One of the first things you'll notice is that the arts are never mentioned in the statute as a tax-exempt activity.
Interesting.
Production, creation, none of it. Now, they do have a charitable bucket, or a miscellaneous bucket they call charitable works. If you can prove it's charitable somehow. But then they don't just leave it. They do define what charitable means. When you go through that definition, no arts. So if the arts aren't considered a tax-exempt activity by the U.S. government, how are so many arts organizations nonprofits? And the answer is, at first they weren't. At first, the IRS said no. Then several of them sued. It went to court, and some judge, probably part of the elite who was a member of a board of an arts organization, said, okay, you're educational organizations, and that's how you qualify.
Interesting.
But then you have to ask yourself, so if you're an educational organization and the University of Washington is a public nonprofit educational organization, what are the metrics that they use to prove worth, and what are the metrics that you use to prove worth? And if you're not proving them in the same manner, if you're saying things like, the arts nurture the soul, or we had this many people come, or look at the economy, because it's all meaningless.
Yeah.
And certainly the idea of excellence is meaningless because it's subjective.
It's abstract, yeah.
Yeah, my excellence could be your horse hockey, to keep it clean. So you can't do it based on that. You have to do it based on, and so here's the ticket. Here's the Willy Wonka golden ticket, right? The golden ticket is you can be hugely successful if you lean on the nonprofit instead of the art. Produce the art as well as you can, but for a purpose. Let it be a tool, let it be the means to an end, not the end to the means. If your art, let's say you have an orchestra, and you decide to lean on the nonprofit side, as an orchestra I talked to did, and they sent people a brass quartet, octet, a brass octet to an overpass, underneath an overpass, to a tent city in their neighborhood in San Francisco, or near San Francisco. And there are a bunch of homeless people living there. They brought the brass because it's so darn loud under an overpass.
Yeah.
So they played for them and they did the show. But they not only did that, and they brought chairs and they brought bottles of water for everybody, and they invited everybody out and they helped them to their seats if they were disabled in any way. But they played for them and they got the applause. These are people who finally felt seen for the first time in years. And they also brought social service people with them from different organizations, and they were asking them questions, at intermission. Would you like me to help you fill out Section 8 housing? Do you want me to find a place for you to take a shower? Because that's the thing they always say they want most, is a shower and a shave. They don't want to be like that. They want a shower. Mm-hmm. They want to be clean.
Yeah.
Where can we get you some new clothes? I can get you some free clothes. I can get you interviews for a job. I can get you a mailing address so that you have a place if you do interview for a job for them to send something, and a phone number. And it turned out that 20% of that group that they performed for, within a year, were no longer living in tents. They were living in Section 8 housing. And half of them had jobs. That makes the orchestra far more valuable to the community than just playing music.
For sure, yeah. Because it's access to the community, not access to people that can afford.
Oh, well, that's our biggest problem, isn't it, in the arts, is that the donors are also the beneficiaries. Mm. I mean, it's the only part of the nonprofit sector that has that. There's an argument to be made about people donating so that their kids can get into college, and you might want to talk to Felicity Huffman about that. But
or Aunt Becky.
Aunt Becky, yes. Oh, Aunt Becky. And many more who didn't get caught. And probably thousands more that didn't get caught. But that's about as elitist as it gets. The donor is the beneficiary. Donors donate so that donors can attend. How elitist can you get?
Yeah. Well, you mentioned community, and I think the future of community theater and community arts organizations lies within the community. So to make that so, how do you suggest, or do you have any suggestions for organizations to become more intertwined with the community, so it becomes a theater by, for, and of the community?
Here's a crazy idea. It's called listening. And you have to go talk to the people who run your community. That's not necessarily the mayor or the city council or something, but it might be. You talk to the people who are actually leading the community, and you do your own research as well, and to find out who those people are. And you say, what do you need? Not what do you need us to do for our next play or our next opera or our next dance or our next exhibit at the museum, but what do you actually need? What are the biggest problems of this community? Maybe we can help solve them. And they'll say, well, how can arts solve that? And then they'll tell them the story of this orchestra. Say, now, let me ask again, tell me what you want. And that's what the Long Wharf Theater did, in New Haven, Connecticut. They had been a pre-Broadway typical League of Resident Theater constituent for years. They owned their building, which was actually on a wharf or near a wharf. It's near the meatpacking district of New Haven, but it's this glossy, beautiful theater on the hill kind of thing. And the new artistic director said, New Haven, Connecticut is a weird city. We have to do something for our city. Half the people are Yaleys, and the other half are kind of lower middle class, not even middle, kind of lower dock workers and things like that. If they're lucky enough to be in the union, they're doing okay. But if they're not, they're not. And that's most of them. And they went to the city and they said, what do you need? And the city said, go talk to our cultural coordinator, cultural arts coordinator. And they said, and after talking about it internally and making some very difficult decisions based on tradition of 60 some odd years, this is a Tony Award winning company, right? dozens of shows to Broadway. They've made the decision to sell the building that they've been in for all these years, go completely mobile, and do work literally in the communities.
Wow.
So they're going to other places to perform so that they can go to the people, because anybody can open a theater company, and anybody can do plays. Anybody can open a theater company. Anybody can open a theater company. You're not that special. But
But you are.
but what they chose to do was to work with the city and figure out a way to get into people who will never be able to afford a ticket, who would never be able to afford the social service help that they also bring with them, and to be a valuable member of the community, thereby making themselves indispensable, not just, really good.
Yeah.
As a result, the first thing the city did was give them $3 million. First thing, out of the box. And they said, there's more of this coming if you can still prove worth, because we can't afford to do it as a city. But we can leverage your $3 million into millions and millions of dollars worth of help.
Yeah. So that flips the model on its head from, people seeking government money to fund this, as you put it, kind of this elitist model of, the people giving the money are the ones that receive the benefit, the benefactors. So, that's definitely what, because you're not talking about, I think when artistic directors think about going out into the community, they're thinking of exactly the first thing you said there was, help me program my season. What do you want to see? But that's not what you're talking about. You're talking about what do you need at a much more basic level than that.
Right. That first way is customer R&D. That's what Disney does. That's what Disney, which by the way does more charitable work than a whole bunch of theaters do, and they don't have to because it's not a nonprofit.
That's true.
But when you say, arts organizations can serve the community, look at Disney as an arts organization, not a nonprofit arts organization, just as an arts organization, and you say, well, okay, it can be done. It's important for, the toxicity of the elitist model is really to the detriment of arts organizations. We've all heard about the Sackler family by now. If you haven't heard about the Sackler family, this is a company, Purdue Pharma, that created OxyContin, that killed 500,000 people, that they knew was addictive and knew was harmful when they put out the product. They were sued for billions. I don't know that they've paid anything yet. They're supposed to have paid something, but they've never apologized. They've never said they were wrong. It's
Go watch Dope Sick.
Dope Sick. That's the thing to watch. Yes, but you can do all the research. That would be about as toxic as it gets. And the PS is that in the New York Times this week, there was an article said that British arts organizations, which had been shunning Sackler money because they're so broke, now they're actually asking for Sackler money. Wow. So it's a question of your own toxicity and your own moral values, and it's kind of disgusting.
Yeah.
So there's that. Let's say that's the worst. I wish it were the worst. There's worse. But every nonprofit arts organization, frankly, every nonprofit arts organization has that person on their board or among their donor base that is toxic. You know who it is. They're the person that when they say they're coming into the office, everybody scatters. They're the person that when they come to a board meeting, the development director is always sort of charged with what a former development director that I worked with called the care and feeding of. They ask for things to the moon. They pay money for it. So there's the one couple in Detroit that paid for their own fancy room at the local opera house, has their name all over it, and they actually hired a security guard with a gun to keep people out during performances. This is at a public institution. Disgusting. But that exists in every single one. Now, if you don't know who it is and you're a board member, I hate to tell you, it's probably you. But if it's not, you have to get those people away from your organization as quickly as you can, because they're the people who are going to continue to insist on arts for their sake. A lot of arts organizations could talk about their purpose as being art for art's sake. I had a friend who used to say, well, if art's for art's sake, then let art pay for it. So if you're not art, art is not for art's sake. Artists can say that. Arts organizations cannot. Artists can produce art for art's sake because in the literal sense, it had to do with an 18th century or 19th century French movement where artists were compelled to paint either religious stuff or, I don't know, landscapes or something. I mean, that's all they were allowed to paint. And so they said, no, art for art's sake, and they painted portraits. So that was considered radical. It has nothing to do with how it's used today, which is that we get to do whatever we want. You have to pay for it. It gets kind of bad, and it extends often with the what is it? The road to hell is paved
with good intentions.
So the good intentions in King County, as you know, or maybe you don't know, there's a 0.1% tax being added to the sales tax. I don't know if it's gone into effect yet. I don't know when it goes into effect. But this is the 0.1% for art. And likely the money will be managed by, I would assume, for culture, because they're the King County Arts group, and then for culture will give it to large organizations and it will trickle down. We all know how well trickle down does. It's about $125 million a year, right? And maybe going up after the first year. So here's my question. If you really want to serve artists, and if you want to do the Richard Florida thing and say, the more artists we have in our community, the better, and you take for granted, because it's a good assumption that artists don't make a lot of money, a tiny, tiny few do. Nobody else does. And you bought a building, like a half full building in Belltown or something, because there are lots of those. And you took those apartments and you made it subsidized housing for artists, period. Like Manhattan Plaza in New York, like the city of Lancaster, California did, and like a few others have done. Rather than send it to the organization so they can hire another development person or have 9 people in the show instead of 8. That's direct aid for artists. They move into your community. They live there. Mm-hmm. They create it's a mass. It's a creative mass of people, and they will help your community become more beautiful, because they're living in it.
Yeah.
It's part of them.
Yeah, and to your point earlier, Florida's point of lifting the entire community up, the entire region, by having artists that want to come in and stay there.
Certainly works for New York. Certainly worked for Lancaster. The property values in downtown Lancaster after they did the whole giving stuff to the artist thing, 126% in 2 years, 3 years. I mean, there's a financial aspect to it, but it's not the reason why you do it. You just want a better community, and artists always create a better community if they are given the chance to work together.
So, for the book, the audience to me sounds like not just board members of arts organizations, but everybody, artists and patrons alike, to hold their arts organizations accountable for what they're doing with, basically not just with their money, but philosophically. What is the biggest thing that you hope people do get out of this book? Is it to have that kind of mindset change in how they work within boards, or they hold their boards accountable?
Interestingly, the answer to that is a parallel to a good piece of art, to be honest. And this is not a good piece of art. This is just a book. And although if you show them the cover has a curtain being pulled back, and then a brick going through the window there. The thing about a brick going through a window is that you can't not do something about it. You have to do something about it. A good piece of art that offers you, if you go see Angels in America, you can't unknow the things that you just saw Tony Kushner write about on stage. Mm-hmm. And in this book, once you read this book, you'll see, oh, this has been going on, and this is still going on, and we never questioned it. We're still in the mode of, we do it this way because we've always done it this way. I've had people on one side say things like, "Oh, that's just not what arts organizations do." To which I say, "Why? Why? What is so special about nonprofit? If you want to, there's the other side. If you want to do what you want to do, go ahead and be a commercial arts organization. It's not hard, and there's no moral high ground to being a nonprofit, to being a charity. Go sell investments, get shareholders, pay them back, at a certain level. Use the Broadway model if you want, where there's a prospectus and you sell the whole thing. You sell the whole season that way. You sell the organization that way, and it's just a business with payback. Then you get to do whatever you want, assuming the money's coming in. You can't use the nonprofit model successfully as just that thing that, well, we get to do whatever we want and we don't ever have to worry about money. No, you have to worry about all of it.
Yeah.
And the reason that they're all closing is because they still don't understand board members, artistic directors, executive directors are still following this model of, if we build it, they will come. And I read that book. It was called Shoeless Joe. That was turned into Field of Dreams. And the line is, if you build it, he will come. And it was about the guy's dad. Yeah. So it had nothing to do with this thing that has caused the building of so many arts edifices around the country. I'd rather an arts organization's legacy be, hey, let's say 20 years after they've closed, and somebody talks about them, it's sort of a tombstone statement, and they say, boy, that company, they were amazing. Do you know that 200,000 people got jobs based on the work they did just from their lifting up the community, as opposed to, did you know that 200,000 people sat in a building and watched a play? Plays are wonderful. Orchestras are wonderful. They're all really good pieces of art. But in America, as a nonprofit, I think the ticket to success and support, and again, that same word, indispensability, is through managing the nonprofit side, being the charity you're supposed to be. Then you become part of you become half the community, rather than this thing over across the street with those crazy artists.
Yeah. Well, the book is Scene Change, Why Today's Nonprofit Arts Organizations Have to Stop Producing Art and Start Producing Impact. Now, you've got a few signing events coming up.
Yep.
I want to make sure we get out there.
Okay, so February 3rd, that's this Saturday, at Book Tree in Kirkland, which is a wonderful independent bookstore. And if you haven't bought the book yet and you can't make any of it, please consider going to an independent bookstore to buy it. They need the help more than anybody. And I know I'm in the city of Amazon, so yes, you can buy it there too. And so the first one is at Book Tree. Come to Book Tree. It's in Kirkland. Parking is easy. It's a beautiful part of town. And 2 o'clock Saturday, Book Tree on Market Street. Then February 10th is a big event. That's at Seattle Rep, which was the reason I came to Seattle in the first place. Seattle Rep hired me away from the Pittsburgh Public Theater. And so at Seattle Rep, in the Rotunda, between performances of Quixote Nuevo, that day, so it's at 5:15. Get there at 5, you're fine. 5 o'clock. Don't tell them I said come at 5 o'clock. Come at 5 o'clock. And we'll be in the Rotunda. It's free. And you come, and Alan Fitzpatrick, who's a wonderful actor in town.
Which I had on the show, interviewed him about his one-man performance of Christmas Carol.
He's amazing, and I've known Alan. We did a play together when I was still an actor, so that's how long ago. It was 40 years ago. Anyway, we come see him. He's going to be doing the interviewing, and we'll do a very short 20 minutes of questions, and then 20 minutes of audience questions, and then 20 minutes of signing books and schmoozing. So come to that, again, free of charge. Just come. And you know where Seattle Rep is. It's in Seattle Center. So the third one is February 24th, and this just got nailed down. That's another Saturday at 1 o'clock at the Barnes & Noble at the Totem Lake Shopping Center. So the thing that you need to know about parking on all three of these things. Parking in Kirkland is easy. Street parking all over the place. Parking at Seattle Center, usually not easy, but in this case, I filtered And I chose a date where there is no event at Climate Pledge Arena that night.
No Kraken game.
There's no Kraken game. There's no concert. There's nothing. So parking should be a snap. If there's not that there's plenty of parking available. And again, you can always take public transportation to Seattle Center. And then third, Totem Lake is a big shopping center. So you'll do your Trader Joe's shopping. You'll come visit. I'll be there from 1 to 3 at Totem Lake at the Barnes & Noble. Very excited about it. Scene Change has changed a lot of people's lives. I've talked to a couple of board members who bought copies in bulk. There's a place where you can buy bulk copies of this. I think it's bulkcopies.com or something. And so they get a discount, but they bought 25 of them for their board, and they're going to be using them at their next retreats. But it's not just for board members. It's for students of the arts. It's for arts administrators. It's for executive directors, artistic directors, certainly donors of the arts, certainly audiences of the arts, and anybody who wants to see their city be a better place by virtue of having nonprofit arts organizations do their best.
And the release date it's already out, or is it
Well,
officially
it's weird.
tomorrow?
It's officially
February 1st.
tomorrow, February 1st, but it's out. And if it says pre-order now, that means you'll get it tomorrow. So go to your favorite bookstore or go online or whatever. And then for some reason, Amazon, I don't know how they did this, but things are wacky. They actually had actual books in hand early, so don't know how that happened. But anywhere you order them, you just go out and get it. I would give you the ISBN number, but you don't need it. Just look up Scene Change Alan Harrison. That should do it.
And the website, there's a website for the book. It's scenechangebook.com.
Scenechangebook.com.
And then as far as what you're up to, Alan, what's next for you, and how can people keep up with whatever you're up to?
Well, they can go to scenechangebook.com, and it will have all the events coming up. In fact, scenechangebook.com will also give you a natural link to my own website, so that if you need a consultation, or you need board help, or you need facilitators, or you need somebody to kind of instill this idea of making the art not just a thing. I'm also doing speaking engagements wherever I can. I've done a couple of conferences already. I'm on the hook for a couple more. And then there's this podcast with Greg Heilman. I'm doing that now, so that you're already seeing that. But yeah, I have a couple others in coming up. I'm available for speaking engagements. I'm available for working with boards. And I recommend, if you work with a nonprofit arts organization and you have access to the board, that you actually do go to that bulk website. I think they were something like $15 a piece if you bought it that way. It's $23.95 is the list price. It's still not expensive, but get 20 of them or 25 of them and choose to have a book club with your board. And I think you'll find some amazing things happen.
Awesome. Well, the book is Scene Change. Alan, thank you so much for stopping by.
My pleasure.
And we look forward to seeing what kind of change we can make with this book.
Boy, wouldn't that be something?
Yeah, it would. Thanks a lot.